professor of criminology, and I'm interviewing Paul Ponsaers, who's a professor emeritus at Ghent University, about your career and about your view on criminology. And I would like to start with the career and your background. You have a very rich career and a very diverse background, I think. I think you've managed to work in 13 different sectors. Can you explain a bit about which roads you have taken?
I started my professional career in at Ghent, at the University of Louvain, and I did my PhD with the late Lode van Utrecht was supervisor, who was in fact at that moment already very involved in research on policing. And I did my PhD at that time, long way ago, on the labor inspectorate in Belgium. And so I was more and more interested in formal forms of social control, I would say. I was a sociologist, my origin. I did sociology in labor, in fact, and afterwards I did sociology in medical care. And from that moment on I got interested in psychiatry, and from that moment on I got interested in criminology, and that's the way it worked. And so that's how I started at the university in Louvain. After that period, which was about 8 years I was there, being assistant professor of Lode van Utrecht, I did completely something else. I was for 5 years professional journalist at the Socialist journal of Belgium, the Morgen, which was a very rich period because I encountered a lot of police officers during that period. I encountered a lot of people which were working in the fields, and afterwards those informers of me as a journalist I met afterwards in my academic career, again in other circumstances. But so this was an interesting period. Afterwards, oh Jesus Christ, as you say, it were 13 different jobs. Afterwards I have been head of the department of police policy at the Ministry of Interior in Belgium. And I did that about 11 years in different circumstances. And we developed quite a lot of different big projects concerning registered crime, monitoring fear of crime, this kind of thing. And after that period, my good friend Patrick Hebrecht asked me to come to the University of Ghent, which at a certain moment I said, okay, I will do that partially. And I did it for 20% during some years, and afterwards I said, okay, we do it now fully, and we invest completely in this professional academic career at Ghent University, which I liked very much. And during that time I have been engaged most of the time in police studies and methods and techniques of social research, and also in sociology of law, because my primary interest of sociologist was there. That's in fact in a nutshell what I did. Yeah.
And you mentioned, because I want to go back to the beginning again, your PhD, you mentioned that it was on the labor inspectorate.
Yeah.
Why the labor inspectorate? It's not such an obvious choice.
It's not an obvious choice, no. It is because we at that time were convinced that a lot of formal forms of social control were in fact not recognized anymore. We are talking about police and policing, but in fact all the state apparatus is invaded by an enormous amount of different agencies, inspectorates, which are in fact regulating to a large extent formally the society, and we wanted to bring that to the surface. And so afterwards we did research on different other kind of agencies in the domain of environment and these kind of things. But that was a start, and so we started to research on the labor inspector, which in fact is one of the most primary functions of a human being, of course, labor. How many hours do we spend on our working place? So that was, I think still it's very interesting and enriching. And in fact, when I did Sociology of Labor, primarily, it was an obvious choice for me.
Yeah. But because now it's recognized as a field of research in criminology.
At that moment it was not obvious at all. Everybody who was criminologist was asking me, why are you working on this subject now? After 10 or more years, everybody says, in fact, it's obvious to invest in that domain. And it's clear. And, I'm very happy also in the domain of corporate crime, more and more this kind of inspectorates are becoming more and more important.
And when you look back on your career, on your different careers, how have those other jobs helped you build your academic function, or helped you in carrying out your academic function? Or should it be seen as separate?
No, not at all. I've always worked in the same domain of criminal justice and enforcement. So also when I was a journalist, I have invested a lot in that domain. So in fact, for me, this is a kind of accumulation and looking to the same subject from different places. So it was very enriching for me. But being frank, if you ask me what I prefer as a job, clearly the academic career was for me the most enriching because of the professional freedom you have, the space of thinking, the academic freedom between brackets, which is quite important, was always quite important to me, to develop these things which you considered yourself as the most important. And I was very glad to be able to do that.
Do you think that's typical for the Belgian academic world, that this academic freedom is so strongly, so much emphasized?
No, I don't think so. To the worst, I would say. Last years during my academic career, I felt that this academic freedom was shrinking to a large extent because of performance indicators at universities and more and more, for instance, inter-university collaboration between different colleagues at different universities was not that much encouraged anymore because you had to gain your score. So at a certain moment I was feeling a bit pity about that evolution, that's clear.
And is there a way to stop the rat race?
I think you need senior academics to do it and to collaborate with others. But I can imagine that it's very difficult for youngsters who are coming into the job to do it because they have to learn their points. No?
Yes, they do. Yeah. So it's something we have to live with, or do you think it will change in the future, that counting systems will change? Or?
What is science in times of austerity? I would say that's a question. And if austerity goes on, I'm afraid that this academic freedom will shrink further. But nevertheless, I think there are always people which an academic mind who want to enlarge their scope, who want to collaborate with each other and to develop together. And I think that, in fact, in times of austerity too, a collaborative form of research is also a gain, I think. And not by necessity doing research in which is financed, but you can do a lot of things in this free space of collaboration, I think.
You have described your past activities, and now you're retired, between brackets, because you're not really passive and behind the curtains. What are you focusing on now? What is your research topic now?
Oh, we finished just the book Adam Edwards, and Antoinette Verhage and myself a book on policing European metropolises, which is a nice example of an inter-university international collaboration between different scholars in different countries, not financed. And that's precisely why I say opportunities you have to build yourself and take that challenge. What I want to do now is to write at the end my sociology of policing. And not that much of policing, but of police, the apparatus, the dark blue matter, the hardcore of the matter. And that's what I will investigate in 2 second year. And trying to develop a bit a sociology of, because in fact precisely in that domain there isn't that much of theorizing on what is policing in fact, and what is police, what does that mean in terms of when national states become less important, how they become less important. When I see to France, for example, what's happening over there, France is a tremendously centralized country, a centralized national state, and the hardcore of that country is more and more the police itself. So in this kind of evolution towards a very centralized, a very sustaining break of that national state is something which I'm afraid of. And therefore I'm very happy about the fact that in Belgium, for example, we have a very strong local police, which is not that much centralized, and that's precisely what I want to develop during that book I want to write.
And do you want to make an international comparison? In
Yeah, sure. Because if we are talking about police, most of the scholars are saying police is the police. Yeah. But it's not at all. There are so many different themes and so many different accents and reasons, motives to function, that that's precisely what I want to get out of. You can say the power of the state, there is the power of the state. There's of course political power to make decisions, but more and more you see that the political power is not strong enough anymore to push their decisions on global political level. But that state apparatus, the police itself, has to guarantee that the existence of the national state. And on the same time, at the same moment, you have that local embedded police who is protecting, which is something, which is serving. Yeah, those words are important, of course. It's not a force, the police force, but it is the police service, who is at the service of the population. And that kind of ambiguity you find in every police system throughout Europe, which is always differently articulated towards each other. And that's precisely what I find very intriguing.
And do you think that within criminology there's enough attention for, because you look at those who enforce and those who control, while most criminologists look for those who perpetrate and who break the law.
Yeah, that's why I always say that I rather prefer to be sociologist than criminologist. Yeah, that's true. But sociology of crime and the causes of crime is of course worthwhile to establish and to develop. But at the same time I think these kind of apparatuses who are the producers of crime. Because in fact all that law enforcement mechanism, to a large extent, mechanism of selection. And who those mechanisms function, we should more research as criminologists, I think. And this needs another kind of approach. I feel myself always still a symbolic interactionist who is not studying that much the phenomenon of crime, but how is crime produced by those instances? And how do those instances produce at a certain moment a certain form of social problem, which is called crime, and at another moment those phenomena are otherwise defined, which is very interesting. And that is, I think the traditional criminology is much too much centered around the problem of crime. Because crime in itself is no entity, it's not a monolith, it doesn't exist in fact, it's a pure societal definition of crime.
Yeah. So this is why it's even more important to look at those who try to fight it.
Yeah, fight or define it,
Yeah.
because a lot of social problems are neglected also by those instances. And another way is also, in looking to the same problem, is also how this kind of state apparatuses are, whether or not, embedded within a more societal approach of problem solving, which is not by necessity criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
Can't we solve problems in another way? Yeah. And can you use those instances, as for example the police, in finding new forms of restorative justice, restorative policing, in other ways of solving social problems? And I'm sure that these instances have a lot of capacity to intervene also at that level, which is most of the time neglected. So those criminologists who always look at crime, the trespassing of the criminal law, I think it's a bit channel blind. But of course, it's good to have them, those criminologists, to invest in that kind of thinking. I'm sure it's important, but it's not enough. These societal mechanisms who are the producers of it, and are reinforcing it, are neglecting it, are much more important, I think.
And when you look at police research or research on policing like actors, because you wrote a book together with Lode van der Trier and Carol Zange, The Insights on Police, in which you combined all kinds of research on the police. Which gaps do you see in police research? What should police researchers focus on more, or how should we organize ourselves?
That's an eternal question. It's very surprising to see that, in fact, if you look throughout Europe, what kind of research is done on police, it's always starting from anew, from scratch. As if the problem which is studied is new. And that is because in the domain of police and policing, there is a lot of research which is in fact contract research and not fundamentally driven. Which makes that in fact there is an inhibition to develop real theory in police, on the one hand, and on the other hand, there is no accumulation. And all problem is specific for that country, and you cannot learn from other practices, which is very strange. And I think it's very typical for the domain, that I really think so. And that in fact came out of that book. Also, the more police services are centralized and are state apparatuses, it's much more difficult to do research on it, because the access to data becomes more and more difficult. The more a police system is more locally embedded, these kind of agencies are more inclined to collaborate. Okay? So the relationship between scientists, social scientists, and police services can vary according to the same lines of distinction, I think.
I want to go to another topic and look back on your achievements. Are there things that you are most proud of looking back at your career, the academic career?
Oh, I'm a very humble person, you know. I don't know. Should be too proud of certain things which I realized. The most important thing I have done always is to have good researchers, to work with them together, to develop youngsters to researchers and become professionals, as you. one of my PhD students, and it's tremendously challenging to have young people who become really mature in the domain, and I found that fascinating. I always found it fascinating. That's something which I miss today. I can write things I want, I can have interest in what I want, but this kind of challenging enterprise together with others disappeared a bit during leaving university as a emeritus. That's the consequence.
And how can you give some tips on how to, because you always say PhD students are like plants, you should water them just enough, not too much, not too little. How do you know when it's too much and when it's too little?
You have to feel it. It really depends on the person. So, PhD student has to be eager, otherwise you can start this kind of enterprise. But at the moment that you are giving too much impetus, you are pampering them, which you should avoid. On the other hand, if you don't give enough impetus, then they are starting to float, and they don't find good structure for themselves. So I think it's almost an art to bring people to what they want themselves to do. And try to go that way together, and not imposing things, but opening opportunities, and that's a really fascinating part of the job, I think.
And did you find it difficult to combine running a research institute with your own research tasks and?
No. During all my life, I have worked together with different persons. So I'm a fish. And a fish lives in schools. In other words, working on my own is something which I learned, but it's not my organic inclination. So working together with other people is something which it becomes a habitus, I think. It's not that difficult, and it really depends on the people which are around you. Without the possibility. And
is that also the reason why you reach out to practitioners and police practitioners like you did within the Center for Policing Studies?
Yeah, the Center for Policing Studies, my former PE supervisor, Dr. Van Utlief, has been president for quite some time of that center, and at a certain moment he asked me, please take it over, because I want to retire. I did so, and from that moment on you encounter a lot of practitioners together with academics, and this incites a new form of debate, because those practitioners are coming with a very actual questions, and on the other hand you say, as an academic, I don't have answers to it, but I don't want precisely to give that answer on this topic, because then you start anew, what we were discussing before, every time starting from scratch again. So you have to build really a kind of ongoing debate, and I think we succeeded to a large extent of it. And this kind of dialogue between the practitioners and scientists, I think it's very productive. If you listen to what they are saying, often academics have the habitus to talk over their heads, just try to explain what you mean precisely. It's quite a challenge, but if you do, they come back. And then you have a real dialogue. I think it's quite important. Certainly in this domain, police officers are people who are not heard often, which is also true in the penitentiary sector, or in all the criminological domain, I think. Practitioners are not heard enough. But to translate their question in a sociological way in the way that they still understand what you mean, I think that's a very difficult endeavor.
It's a challenge for many academics, I think. Yeah. Yeah. And can you solve it by choosing different kind of publishing channels to reach practitioners?
Yeah, sure. That's precisely also the rat race those academics are in. They have to publish only in high-ranked journals, but at the same time those journals are not read by academics. So I always tried in the past to do both at the same time and to have a kind of output who is a return to their living worlds, and at the same time trying to develop academic publication. But nevertheless, one goes with the other, I think. Yeah. And one can be very inspiring for the other. But if I see now to the academic world, a lot of young researchers are not able anymore to do this kind of endeavor, to that kind of effort, because they are not rewarded for doing that. So that is, I think it's a loss. I think it's a loss. Because also, if you want to do research in police, they have to know you, they have to trust you, to a certain extent. They have to be aware also of the fact that you can be very critical, but nevertheless they can trust you. You will not do something against them. And precisely this kind of equilibrium you have to reach also through your publications, of course. And they have to read it, otherwise they don't understand you.
No. Okay. When you look at criminology in Belgium, are there things that have surprised you during your career, or things that stand out, or special developments within criminology in that period, or criminological research?
What is surprising is, of course, the fact that research is going down. And there was a period in Belgium we had, and we lived that period together in our research group, that there was a lot of money going on, a lot of possibilities to do research. Today those resources are becoming very limited and very difficult. And of course, science is also the subject of that evolution. And the less research you have, the less knowledge you build and accumulate during time. So that's one of the things which strikes me very much, but nevertheless I think we in the past we did quite some, for example, at a certain moment we have done some research on registered crime. And from a certain moment we were starting from what files are made by the police and what comes out in court. And when I shouted out loud that only 4% of those files are coming in court, nobody would believe me, except for when we demonstrated that how these selection mechanisms were functioning. Everybody said, Jesus Christ, what's happening? What are we doing now? And that's precisely what I mean. And that kind of research outcome opens eyes. I'm very sure about that. So I was quite fond of that research, which I always found very intriguing, is also at the end of a PhD trajectory, that a PhD researcher in the end said, this is my thing, this is my result, and I defend it now. And a public defense of a PhD I found always terrific, challenging. Yeah. No?
Yeah, it is. Does gender play a role in researching criminology in Belgium?
Yeah, sure. I think of course, it's a university phenomenon. I always had much more researchers which were female than male.
We also have more female students.
Yeah. And in the end, those who are becoming professors, most of them are male, which is very strange. Also that are selection mechanisms, of course, of the institution, the university, of course, that's clear. But nevertheless, there are some women, as you are. And so there are possibilities, but I think the university itself doesn't recognize enough these kind of difficulties you have to just pass at the moment that you want to have children, want to have a job as an academic, and these kind of things together at the same time. Though this is tricky to manage. University is not used to take that into account enough. So that's certainly is the one of the explanations. That certainly is. Also, the possibilities to work on a partial basis are much too small. I always was thinking, imagine that when I was teaching, imagine that when I become ill for a certain period, there is what is there? There is no guarantee that this course can go on. So you really have, it's a very challenging job. You are alone there for delivery. So I can imagine that's quite difficult for a woman to guarantee that, within the context of the actual university. See what I mean?
And research itself, not only with regard to the position of women within the university, but also within criminological research. Do you think there's enough attention for gender issues there?
No. I don't think we, in Belgium at least, but also abroad, there is not too much interest in investigating that issue. There are a lot of for instance, we have more and more police officers today in different countries in Europe. What is now the difference? Is there a difference or not between the practice of those female police officers and those male police officers? We don't know.
No, we don't.
So that's very strange. Because you would expect that this is precisely the outcome of a societal evolution, and now we have them on the working floor, and what is the result now? We don't know. We don't want to know.
We assume we know, probably. We think they have more social skills and
probably, but that's what we assume. That's not what is happening.
No.
So there could be much more than that. That's clear. That's clear.
Okay. So we talked about criminology in Belgium. When we look at criminology in Europe, do you see specific trends there in research? Or specific topics that are noticeable?
That which should be developed?
Or which are developed now?
Yeah, well, I think precisely in the domain of financial and economic crime, there is a tremendous effort which has been done last year. And I think it's also the crimes of the powerful are important, I think. And we should invest more in them.
Yes, certainly.
That's clear, but that's not new. But nevertheless, I see that more and more research is done on this item, and which is of high quality. That's clear. I think we got rid a bit of that fetish of the organized crime, which in fact was a policy creation, not a scientific one. I always doubt about the name of organized crime, because even a thief can be very professional and very professionally organized, of course. So what does that mean? But that we got rid of it, but that the Panama Papers should be for criminologists an important issue, of course. And we should do more about that, I think. But nevertheless, I'm trustful that it's happening quite a lot on the domain. that's important. What I see disappearing more and more is precisely sociology of law. In fact, it is not discipline at all anymore at a lot of universities. And nevertheless, it's an important source of inspiration for solving societal problems, not only by that criminal law, but also by other forms of law. So I think this should be more developed. There are still some, Onyate is still there in Basque Country, who strives to develop this kind of discipline, but nevertheless there should be done more, I think.
And do you see big differences between American criminology and European criminology? Or are they growing towards each other?
No, I don't think so. I think the European criminology is much too much inclined towards the American one, and taking over a lot of research questions which are not by necessity the central research questions in Europe. And that's not something you have to how can I say it? I don't think that's the fault of the Americans, because they are doing quite a lot of good research. I think it's a problem of European researchers who do not inspire themselves towards the American inspiration, but get rid a bit of European questions, which are often very. For example, can I give you an example in the field of police? All the problem of public order, which is not crime fighting, which is not criminal law, is completely otherwise articulated in the US than in Belgium or other European countries. A real sociology of public order, European one, we don't have. And to a large extent what we do as criminologists in this domain is inspired by American research.
And is it because of the language barrier within Europe, it's more difficult to
Probably
reach
because of language barrier, also because it's not by necessity a barrier. The processes of transmitting information is our English. Is our Esperanto English, I don't know, the European English. But the carrier takes also the content, of course. So a lot of our knowledge, of our thoughts are inspired by an Anglophile world, which is not by necessity bad, but nevertheless focuses in another way the problem.
And can the ESC play a role in this?
I think I've always been very fond of the European Society, because the European Society, I sustained it from the beginning, is a very important vehicle for doing that. Sure. But also going to the ASC, the American Society of Criminology, with our European results, and trying to a real comparison, not integration, but a real comparison, differences in diverse versions are, I think, much more important.
I wanted to ask, because I know that you're a regular participant at the ESC, and for example also the policing working group. I think they're a bit invisible sometimes, so the working groups are a bit invisible. How can we strengthen them, or shouldn't we strengthen them?
Yeah, everything depends on your own strength. You don't have to attend from others what you should do and you can do. You have to do it. That's as simple as that. I think that working group on police, in any case, is a very strong one. I think so. In the past, we organized some pre-conferences concerning policing. And I think that's a good formula.
Yeah.
Just to bring people together for 2 days, and then go to the ESC, and having some. Then you have a more stronger interaction, and then you can go further in the broader group. These are means of working which you can develop easily. It depends really on your own initiative.
Yeah. So it's not invisible, but not so visible for other participants, maybe.
But that's perhaps not that dramatic.
No.
Visibility is in essence not that important.
And when we go to the future, what do you see as future challenges for criminology in Europe?
To get rid of crime.
No, that's a big challenge.
No, but what I mean is, of course, let's try to redefine social problems, not only in terms of crime. There are a lot of problems you can solve in another way. And of course you have to solve problems, that's clear. But so this needs some space of maneuvering, some space of experimental research. And there, the dominant ideology of maintenance criminal law, enforcement, is, I think, very strong. And the creativeness of developing other forms of solving problems, and not only by restorative means, but also by administrative means, by other forms of interventions, measures, should be developed, I think, and should be sustained by criminologists. And perhaps we don't use the label crime anymore then. Perhaps we should talk then about social problems, more general sense. So perhaps we have to reinvent a new name for criminology.
Yeah. Does it also mean that we have to work more to cooperate more as criminologists, also between different schools or different?
I think so. Yeah, sure. I think so. We can learn a lot of each other, and we don't have enough space to discuss matters in depth. But we do at the ESC is perfect. But it's a very thematic encountering. On a specific item, we have a workshop and we discuss that. But there's some room for more creative forms of deliberation should be given place, I think. It would be very useful.
Yeah, and a kind of a mixed workshops or?
Yeah. Or discussions.
Yeah.
Real discussions. We don't have that much opportunity to discuss with colleagues from abroad to each other. And often if we do it with often the same guys. It should be...
because we always go to the same kind of sessions. And we choose
sure.
sessions that are most close to our...
Yeah.
Okay. I'm reaching the end of my questions.
I can imagine.
Which question would you pose yourself as a final question? Is there a topic that we didn't discuss? Is there something that you would like to share?
Ooh, I think criminology is a very, very intriguing domain, as we define it now. So there are so much things to be done. So don't hesitate, I would say, to develop new forms of methodologies, new forms of subjects. But a specific item now, I don't have in mind. No.
Nothing that keeps you awake, as you say. You have
no, I want to write that Sociology of Police. This keeps me awake.
Okay. I look forward to it.
Okay.
Sociology of the Police.
Thank you.